and welcome to another episode of our series of podcasts on EV evolution in India. This one is on a very relevant topic for the electric vehicle ecosystem in India, which is EV startups steering the e-mobility transition in India. So, as we know, the electric vehicle transition or the e-mobility transition is being steered by a lot of startups, several young starting entrepreneurs who are getting into this disruptive technology space and coming out with different kinds of R&D, different kinds of technologies to kind of take forward this transition. So today we have two such startups with us who are going to discuss the various opportunities and challenges for startups in this particular ecosystem. We have Vishak Sashikumar. He is the founder and CEO of PiBeam Electric. PiBeam is an IIT Madras incubated startup which was founded in 2013, and they are mainly into micromobility electric vehicles and technologies. So we're looking forward to know more about the various kinds of products and solutions that you have on board, Vishak. Welcome. And on the other hand, we have Mr. K.V. Narasimham, who is the co-founder and CEO at Quantian Powertrain. This is again an IIT Delhi incubated startup, and they are into the development of axial flux motors, and I think that's a very important component of electric vehicles, and they're doing some great work. So, looking forward to know more about your experience and your challenges, Mr. Narasimham. Welcome. So, I'll start with a few curious questions from my end, just to kind of get the discussion started. First of all, Vishal, which is your favorite startup from the EV ecosystem? Current favorite?
Apart from PiBeam, right?
Yes, apart from PiBeam.
So coming from IIT ecosystem, so I have been working a lot with Ather Energy. Okay. Tarun Mehta is one of my favorite. Ather Energy is one of my favorite, just because the sheer amount of effort they have put into building a product right from scratch and putting into the market. So they were the front runners in this EV ecosystem that we are talking about. I give full credit to them for, say, their effort for the last 5-6 years.
Right, great. One of my personal favorites as well. What about Mr. Narasimham? Which one is your favorite startup from the EV ecosystem? Apart from
Quantian. We've been working with very few startups and more so with the established companies so far. But yeah, one of the startups that we've been working with, and we are definitely excited about the products that they would be launching very soon, is EVAge, which is a Chandigarh-based startup working on ground up vehicles. Like we are doing something on the motor side for ground up. They have virtually done something amazing insofar as the entire vehicle. So yeah, we are excited about them hitting the market very soon. So yeah, as taking off from Vishak, like Ather laid certain yardsticks in the two-wheeler segment. There is not many, especially in the four-wheeler and that segment, who have done something path-breaking. So yeah, they are some of the ones who probably are sitting on something which would be revolutionary on that aspect.
Right, that sounds really interesting. Okay, and another question from my end. Given a chance, which electric four-wheeler and two-wheeler would you love to drive?
Okay, I own an XN EV, so yeah, not for anything else. It was just that when I want the entire world to shift, the least I could do was start patronizing an EV. So a four-wheeler that, and for a two-wheeler, not yet decided. Probably at my age, I'm more comfortable driving a four-wheeler, so I think I would rest my case there.
All right. What about Vishak? Which one would you love to drive?
So I believe in micro mobility vehicles. So small vehicles are my favorite. So product called Paymo, which is a small electric bike, which doesn't consume much electricity. So I would like my personal choice of moving around a city is Paymo.
Okay.
Talk about four-wheeler. So technically, I'm not a big fan of driving a four-wheeler alone. So if I have four people, I'm okay with driving a four-wheeler. So otherwise, I'm not thinking about four-wheeler.
Right. Thank you. So with that, I think we'll move to the more serious questions for today's podcast. I'm going to start with you, Vishak. Uh, First would be about your journey. So the shift from ICE to ICE vehicles to electric vehicles has actually enabled a lot of startups to get into the automotive sector. And many of these we have also interacted with and we know about. They are in different phases of product development as well as deployment. But wherever they are, in whichever phase they are sharing this particular transition. So you being a part of this particular dynamic group and also journey, I'd like to know about how it has been for you.
Yeah, so we came to this segment, EV segment, in 2013, as you was pointing out that we started there. So that time, EV was not mainstream. People were just talking about EVs, and there were hesitation all around ways to run an EV or buy an EV. So we started by doing the core research of building a vehicle, right from. So we didn't have core manufacturers like Narasimhan, who was building motors. So we didn't have a motor manufacturer, we didn't have a battery manufacturer. So only thing we know is we know how to build a vehicle, and the motors, batteries, everything was coming from outside. So we started working initially on an integrated approach by understanding how these parts can be integrated and we can build the vehicle. So slowly, as the market started opening up, we have started working with people who are making individual components. So now the journey started in that way, and then slowly we realized that, okay, there are individual component manufacturers coming to Indian ecosystem. We started partnering with these people, and we are a company who believes that, and our business model is not exactly manufacturing EVs alone. So we start from building the electric vehicles, getting the, so we are actually building a platform. We are moving away from just a manufacturer. So we are going to control how the product is financed. We are going to control how the product is operated for various last mile logistics and commute operations. So we are going to be a full stack player here. That means that we have very less competitors, but we have more partners, right? So we don't believe in competition word. We believe in collaboration. And at the same time, so we started building our own products using that we have. So we were fortunate to be in IIT Madras ecosystem where there were individual component manufacturers coming up. So batteries, be it motors. One thing we were able to do was during this period, we were able to get the EV know-how, which unfortunately most of the EV as a service players now lack because they have bought the vehicle from outside and started renting it out without knowing how the product is made. So that is something that we were able to, in our journey, we focused on building the products. We sold close to 1,000 vehicles in the market. We have done the service and maintenance of these vehicles. So this gave us an idea on how these vehicles are working real time in a situation on road, how it is performing. So then we decided that, okay, now we have the knowledge. We have partners. So slowly we have started seeing people taking each component manufacturing seriously. So we understand we are not there to compete with a motor manufacturer or a battery manufacturer. They are all our enablers for us to build a product, right? So we started partnering with these people. So currently we are in a situation where we have our own products and we also are building a larger platform. So we are building India's largest EV ecosystem platform, which includes manufacturers, which includes component manufacturers, which includes investors who wants to invest in EVs. We are bringing in companies who have demands like Amazon, Udaan kind of people who wants large vehicle fleets. Then we also bring in individual investors who want to invest in EVs. So we are building the entire ecosystem and then we are operating the vehicles as well. So it's a full stack play. So we believe that there's no point in building the vehicle and selling. So that is one model of business model where it will work for B2C. But in B2B, you have to control all the variables. So we have shifted a lot from 2013 to 2021 when we are talking here?
I think that was very, very succinctly put. And I personally agree with you on the ecosystem approach. It's very important to not work in silos. It's very important to work with all your enablers to ensure that this entire transition and your own growth process happens very smoothly. Right? So kudos for that. What about you, Mr. Natavam? How has the journey been for Quantian? What kind of opportunities, what kind of challenges have you faced on the way?
Okay, now probably since Vishak allied to certain aspects of technology development and individual subcomponents for the EV part. See, as a country, for far too long, we've been very happy with technology coming from elsewhere, and we've been happy with setting up a process line. So now when you want to change that, it comes with its challenges. Of course, right from the basic design, as Vishak also allayed, that there is hardly any empirical data available for the EV running on the road. So at the end of it, you need this data, be it for design, be it for improvement, whatever the case may be. So in our case, we actually started working on a technology which is still even globally at a very nascent stage. I mean, probably what we are trying to achieve, if we manage, it would be kind of a path-breaking in itself, because see, technology development which happens globally, money is never a challenge. So what happens is any R&D entails a lot of investments. And when we are doing it in our country, as he mentioned, initially it was all about integrating and putting a product on the market. So now suddenly, like when we started a journey 2 years back, we would tell people that please look at your controllers, please look at your cells, please look at your motors. But they would all say, kahin se aa raha hai, let's put it together and it goes. But they have realized, fortunately, in 2 years, the takeoff has not been huge. So whatever problems came, some people have managed to curtail it and find solutions. Others have just wound up because they've realized that this is not a model. And once the volumes grow, and if the percentage of problems remains same, it's simply unmanageable. So towards that end, at least now, there are virtually everyone has understood that I need to customize a motor, I need to customize a controller, my battery pack has to be customized. So the whole thing that kahin se bhi kuch bhi aayega is out of the window. People have realized that. So now that has been a kind of a probably a catalyst for the work we are doing now for the last 2 years, because people have realized that this is needed. But when now coming back to what we are still doing, it's still a uphill battle for the simple reason that a lot of processes and the know-how of what we are doing has to be virtually defined in every aspect, in every element of it. So we are defining it, and fortunately, probably, I'm sure Vishak also would have realized that being in IIT Madras would have helped in certain manner. For us also being in IIT Delhi has been an enabler, and also the fact that, okay, having spent 20 years in uniform, you are connected to a lot of people who can get in that particular technology, as well as they're willing to invest their efforts pro bono to develop something with a larger intention in mind. So that way, it has been a very challenging yet fulfilling. I mean, let me be honest, no 2 days have been the same. I mean, you think that you have solved one problem, the next day there are two, next day there are zero, but by the end of the day, you have 4 more. But yes, it has been a very encouraging journey, to probably put it very mildly, considering that we started on an idea, and that has now virtually become a reality. And now, hopefully in the next 2-3 months, there would be vehicles running on axial flux motors, which itself would be a huge step forward for us as an ecosystem. I mean, the fact that we need that sense of belief and that courage of conviction that we also can think of something and take it to its logical conclusion, because EV otherwise was a Chinese bandwagon. I mean, for want of any other better word, for a long time. And even now, a lot of things are following that model, but it's okay. But it's time we change it. And I personally feel that as the Indian entrepreneur ecosystem went, we hacked the code insofar as the service industry for probably hardware. And hardware is definitely much more challenging and difficult. But yeah, I mean, we will find a solution. We are as capable as anybody. It is just that it was something we never did. So EVs gave an opportunity for a lot of small teams to work on processes, technology, which now as a whole will become a very potent force.
Thank you. And love that comment about the Chinese bandwagon. We'll come to that later on in the podcast. We'll come to that. So, Vishak, my next question is to you. Being a startup in this particular ecosystem, you spoke about the different kinds of support you required and how an enabling ecosystem is important. So my question would be that what is the kind of support that is readily available and what is still missing in the Indian context? And while you move towards commercialization, what kind of policy support do you expect from the government for facilitating your growth and development?
So the first part of the question, is it based on the support we have received from IIT, or is it something that I would like to have?
All kind of support from the ecosystem. What is it that you have got readily, and what is it that you feel is still missing in the Indian context?
Yeah. So initially, when you start an EV startup, the first thing is like you need say the right hardware support system rather than the software side. There are multiple components which might. So as I said, when we started off, these components like batteries or motors come from outside. It is almost everything is masked, so you don't know what is going inside each component, right? So we have learned everything in theory, but when we get the vehicle, when we get that component, we don't know how to operate. If something happens, we don't know how to repair it. So the idea was a hardware ecosystem should have a right enablement for say learning about components initially when you start it. So that is what IIT provided. IIT Labs had all facilities to test the components. So testing, so first thing, if you're not making something, the first thing that you will do is you will start testing the components and start generating data out of it. So you go back to the design and say, okay, how can we tweak the design, and then come back from there. So if you don't have anything readily available, right? So that support, where the lab support is very much required for any EV startup who's working on a core area. And since we started from inside IIT campus, it was readily available for us. The second one was the right mentors for us in the particular area that we are in. So business is one side, but at the same time, you need to know whether we will be going wrong in the long term. We cannot spend 2 years, 3 years in one direction and suddenly realize that, oh, this was the wrong direction, right? So that's where IIT has given us that support of choosing the mentors. So the problem that we faced there was, to be frank, the traditional auto industry didn't have the capability of building an EV in India. So whoever we go in a traditional industry, automotive industry, they were not able to help us beyond a particular level. So we wanted to get to those mentors, especially outside India. So IIT being like, there are a lot of people who have studied in IIT and gone out. We are able to reach out to people even from Tesla to get that know-how of how the motor works and what are the ways in which the battery. So what we have looked at the battery chemistry in India versus what is happening was entirely different. So we thought the lithium iron phosphate was the end of lithium, right? There were multiple chemistries that have come up, including Tesla going to the aluminum-based chemistry. So we all were able to get knowledge base because of this ecosystem, the spread of the ecosystem. Because of the knowledge bank that is available. So only thing is, like, as a startup, you should go and seek information. Otherwise, nobody is going to come to you, because this is a new industry. The information is there, but it is spread. You have to collect the information and get back. So that is what the ecosystem has helped us initially. And as you know, when you start up, you need a basic support, even that can be a financial support, which needs to push you for that. So because when you go with an idea, nobody will believe you. Investors will never believe you, especially if it is an EV. They will say, okay, it works everywhere, in India it doesn't work. So that was the initial company we got in 2013, right? So we said, okay, we have to prove it. So when we start building the vehicles itself, people will say, okay, manufacturing is a very capex oriented business. Where do you get this money from? Like, we will fund you right now, but where will you get the next round of funding from? So the support that we got from IIT Madras ecosystem was the initial breather, so that even if initial days we are not taking salaries, at least we have money to build a product. So that is something that is really important. So that is exactly why, even if I'm given a chance to start this PiBeam again, I'll start in the ecosystem like IITs. And it can be IIT Delhi, it can be IIT Madras. But I'll never think of going to an incubator, which a software company can go and then grow. We'll never get that support. So from the government standpoint, what I've seen is, say, to be frank, there were FAME 1, FAME 2, but they took a lot of time to understand the ecosystem. So giving subsidies is one thing. So I'm not a fan of subsidies, because I know that subsidies will give you an initial push, but it will never work in the long term. And people will expect the same subsidies to continue, which is not going to be there. And we don't know if the government changes, the subsidies will also change. The things that, what I'm saying is the industry should never be dependent on subsidies or the government related say benefits that we are trying to get. If it is sustainable, without that, subsidies will just aid the process. That's what we believe in. And to that extent, our initial products was not eligible for subsidy, because we built a product which is pedal assisted electric three-wheeler, which was not in the Motor Vehicle Act. It was not even mentioned in the Motor Vehicle Act. If you have a pedal assisted two-wheeler, which is mentioned, these three-wheelers are trikes in US and Europe. Power point, 750 watts of power. These vehicles were exempted. It is like a normal tricycle, exempted in Europe and US. But when Indian, this thing was formed, regulations were formed, the three-wheeler was not mentioned, and then so we couldn't go for regulation. So that was our first product. So there was not even regulation and there was not even subsidies. Then we came up with a two-wheeler, which we have one more product, which has a regulation which we have got the certification from. But since it's a slow-moving vehicle, there is no subsidy for that. So when we build this, the subsidies have moved to a speed limit of 40 km per hour. So now we are building another product which is above 40 km per hour again. So these subsidies will keep on going in one side. But for us, since right now our business model is entirely deploying maximum number of vehicles on the ground, we are not worried about subsidies, because we are not actually in the selling business now. We are in deployment, and our end game is data. So we are now building the largest data platform. Largest data platform means like multiple number of information that we are going to get from vehicle. So there are three levels of we are building on. So one is a vehicle level data. The second one is a driver level data. Third is the material level data. What we are transporting, we are actually tracking that, and how it is in locations. So we would like to be known as a data company in the next 3 years' time. So EV is going to be one part of us.
Okay. That's great to know. And that's quite a very interesting diversification for PiBeam. Right. So you have very rightly answered my queries about how important an educational institution or institution center can be for the growth of startups. And I think I'm going to ask Mr. Narasimham the same, given that theirs is the startup which has been incubated in IIT Delhi. So, Mr. Narasimham, what is the significance of testing as well as R&D support for the growth of startups? And if you could specifically tell us about Quantian and how IIT Delhi, what kind of role IIT Delhi has played in its growth and development?
Okay, I mean, probably for us, IIT Delhi has enabled us to open certain doors where we needed access to. However, insofar as core R&D development is concerned, I mean, there's not much available presently. It's still, in the field that we are working, core R&D probably is not even available in the country. Probably there are one or two places where I can tap into for certain aspects, because unfortunately, it's not been happening. And probably Vishak has been fortunate that he could use the test labs and other things there, because usually for the EV, at least for the motor and the motor testing that we need, generally the research work doesn't happen at that particular level. So the test setups and all are not as powerful as what we need. I mean, whether it is the torque handling capabilities or whatever. So be that as it may be, I mean, but the fact is IIT enabled us, it was a nuanced difference. I mean, when we initially started our journey, it would be okay. I mean, you're doing something, nobody would probably appreciate at that point of time when we started in 2018 and Axial Flux, it was still very, very new. I mean, insofar as having a hands-on experience and this thing, we were fortunate. I mean, I'm sure both of you would be aware that submarines are the first electrical vehicles which have been working for, I mean, a better half a decade now. So having worked on these platforms, all the aspects, what he mentioned about battery handling, battery health, motors, generators, we were lucky that you had a first-hand hands-on experience, which definitely enabled us in our journey. But insofar as R&D and other things, I think it is still some way before we are at a stage wherein a startup can go and say, okay, I want to do this, kindly give me help. Though, I mean, DST is working on offsetting the capital investment required to set up an R&D manufacturing for whatever, whether it is battery, whether it is controllers, whether it is motor. But I think there is some time for that, but it would happen. I mean, it would happen at some point of time where that support also would be forthcoming. Probably coming to what government can do, I mean, the PLI scheme was a downer. I mean, virtually they wrote off every startup from that map of being making the cut to get the PLI. So I don't know. I mean, there would be some vision behind. Probably they would be thinking that to enable the bigger players would ensure that the chain would continue. A startup might be there, gone tomorrow, so that's possible. But probably, yes, there probably needs to be done something beyond that for startups to get into manufacturing. I mean, I was just on a call 2 days back with a Japanese MNC whom we've been. So even they were surprised when they went to the PLI scheme document and they said it calls for a huge investment. And they asked me as to how am I planning to meet those markers. So if an MNC can think like that, I don't know if very many startups would be in a position to actually tap into it. But I'm assuming that it's the first announcement. There would be certain refinements going forward. And definitely, I feel consolidation will start. I mean, it's just a matter of time before probably a lot of people doing good work would start getting under a bigger umbrella. And thereafter, things would start falling in place. I think the next segment in the EV ecosystem would be that. I mean, the people who probably reap the initial benefit of the ROI would probably fall by the side. Quality products would sustain, and the support structure for those products will start getting consolidated. Like as Vishak mentioned about how they are going about building up the entire ecosystem. A lot of players are doing that so that not only to ensure their own uniqueness, but also to secure their supply lines. So that is what the model that is more and more widely being embraced by the startup, I would say, not the bigger players, but the startups is all about, I mean, you grow and I will also grow. So probably that is something that in the coming days would be a new chapter that would unfold, especially in the EV sector.
And I think the sense of solidarity, that's quite inspiring and that's quite motivating.
No, it is sense of survival. It is survival of the fittest. It is nothing beyond that.
Of course. Of course, that is always there. Since you mentioned the PLI scheme, I think I'm going to add to that and ask you another question. The government is pushing aggressively towards indigenization of the entire electric vehicle manufacturing supply chain. So, PLI being one of the schemes that they have implemented for that purpose. There's also the FAME, there's also various other subsidies and schemes that are coming up. However, Indian OEMs are still, focusing on imports for some of the key components of their vehicles. And say, if you take cell manufacturing or even motor controller, they're still in a nascent stage of development in India. So, what do you see as the main opportunities and main roadblocks in this process of indigenization?
Okay, sure. I have probably, since I am the lower subcomponent, let me take it, then Vishak can move on to the bigger picture. It's two-part. One is R&D, fine. I mean, you will make a product. However, thereafter, to take it to that level of deployability is another challenge. And unfortunately, the point is, when you start doing this, you realize that there is an ecosystem which is just not existing. So that is what is one of the biggest challenges, whether it is motor, whether it is controller, whether it is BMS, anything. I mean, cells, I think for a long time to come will come from elsewhere. I mean, I don't think we would, at least in the near term, maybe 3-4 years before, probably we'll start making the cells. I'm not even going into the semiconductor side of things. So that is something which would definitely be a challenge. But the biggest advantages I see is, EV enables small players, as you mentioned, Vishak said about micro-mobility. People are looking at micro factories, and it enables you, if you have an access to a battery pack, a motor, and a controller which is dependable, believe me, you would have such customized products being made. I mean, somebody in the hills will make something which is tweaked to give you high torque, low speed. Somebody in plains looking at doing a fixed run between two warehouses where he can do a higher speed will go for a different model. So the customization which an EV can afford is tremendous. And it also enables small players to make a niche application-oriented products, which can then sell. So the opportunity for this kind of development is, I mean, phenomenal. And for us as a motor developer, I mean, EV is probably not even 1% of the deployment of motors. I mean, so it is actually insane. It is just about making a start, and thereafter finding opportunities will come. I mean, believe me, today, anybody who comes and sees an axial flux motor which is lying in IIT will always come up and say, we got these two requirements. But there is a time for it. So what you develop for, whether it is EV sector or whatever, motors are sector agnostic. So that is something that I see as an opportunity. I mean, probably I must have shared with you when we met that, I mean, it is like the LED movement of bulb 20 years back. I mean, today you don't see anything but LED. So probably EVs allowed people to look at motors with a critical eye, and they realized, hello, I mean, it is serving a purpose, but it is not the most efficient solution. And the cat is among the pigeons insofar as machine design goes. So you would find a lot of churns happening, not only in the EV. EV, of course, is a glamorous go-to segment to design a motor, but you would find that motor technology in various segments would see a churn. So that is insofar as machine design is concerned, the opportunity goes.
And what are the roadblocks that you see in this particular process of indigenization?
I mean, people talk about magnets. The hard fact is even the electrical steel is entirely imported. So there are so many things. I mean, whether it is now, like I've been talking to, it's only MNCs for a lot of process optimization, because in every aspect of it looks very humble. But whether it is a casing, whether it is an end cover, whether it is a bearing, anything you want to do, unfortunately, every aspect of R&D is happening outside the country. So that is something definitely which cannot change overnight. So probably we are just trying to do one bit of trying to indigenize a design and do the manufacturing in India. However, a lot of things would still continue to come from outside. But yes, a business always finds the path of least resistance. So if you're doing something and people say value, support will pour in. But whether it would be hardcore R&D, indigenous inputs, I think that's a tall call to make. But yes, even if I have an indigenous design, which we can do as per anybody's requirement, that itself would be a huge step forward for us as an ecosystem.
Right. Thank you. I think you put it very well. But over to Vishak to know more about his thoughts on the opportunities and roadblocks in the process of indigenization.
So for us, major problem as a vehicle manufacturer initially, then now we are into the shoes of, say, manufacturing plus the operations. So our deployment opportunities are very huge in front of us. And when we are looking at manufacturing the vehicle itself, the problem that we are facing in indigenization is the partners we are talking to, they are also not able to give us the scale of vehicle requirement. Because we know there are a lot of technologies that are available in the market in India in a prototyping stage. Some of them have done a pilot. But if we say a minimum number of 100 motors or 100 batteries per month, there are very less players who can do a good job in manufacturing and giving to us. That is, there are technologies which are really good, but the problem is for them to put a manufacturing plant, they need to have a steady flow of orders. Right? So unless otherwise, they have to raise a huge round of funding to put this manufacturing setup. So there are a lot of people who are stuck in these areas where they have a genuine product which works well, but to scale it up, they require a lot of support. And the support should come from, as Narasimhan was also talking about, it should come from either government or investors who are believing in a larger vision. So then we will be able to, because this is like always a chicken and egg problem. Infra is needed to build the products, but unless you support, what do you think? How can we produce, right? So we were in that situation initially when we were manufacturing. And at this point also, the problem is for us to manufacture a vehicle, it is something straightforward. But the components, some of the components that, and we don't wish to take it from other countries if India has a technology. So we have almost 90% in our vehicle with most of the partners in India. So something, especially like since Narasimhan is also here, the main pain point even now we have is the motors, like especially the hub motors that we have.
We should connect offline.
Yes. So even the controllers, we are able to get it from India. The motors, so one is magnet, as he was rightly pointing it out. Well, even if he is going to make a motor, the magnet, if it is magnet motor, magnet has to come from outside. Right? So that there are certain components right now, India doesn't have the ability to get the raw materials from. So that is at least what we can do is start off with something so that those individual components we can focus later. So right now we need somebody to make an indigenous motor. At least the design should be in India. And some of the components which are not in our hands, it's okay to come from outside. That's all we can do. But at least that should be the scale. And so that is where like the major roadblock for us as well. Even the batteries, we definitely know that cells are not being produced in India. But the problem is when we are talking about, say, getting data out of these components, there should be the BMS which should be able to control, or we should be able to tweak the BMS. Like cells is a dumb thing. The main brain is BMS. So if BMS can be controlled, then we can do our end application better. So similarly, the motors, one thing is like what we get from outside, we don't know what motor it is. We get it, we get a lot of 50. Okay, sometimes 2 of them doesn't work. And if I need to go behind how it doesn't work, and finally we figure out like it is not working. When we call the outside countries, they'll say, okay, it's 2 motors, we can't do anything. Right? And for them, it is 2 motors. But for me, it is a problem whether it is 2 out of 50 now. What if out of 50 next lot, right? The lot itself is different. So the ability And reliability on these motors is something that always as a manufacturer we fear. So at least if it is an Indian company, we can go sit in their office and then discuss. So this is something that is a roadblock for indigenization. I think now we should have some component manufacturers scale up to that level where they come mainstream. And then we focus more on getting these people and giving orders to these people. So we are definitely open to any Indian company who has good motors, good batteries. We are ready to give orders. So we were one of the initial companies who worked with Amara Raja for lithium batteries. So like initially for at least a year, we were giving them the largest number of orders as well. So the idea is like whatever vehicle we are manufacturing, we need these components. But unless you have a steady supply of manufacturing that is coming in, it is very difficult for us to say that it is indigenous. Like we can work with anyone and then build prototypes and do pilots. But in scale, we need to figure out who is coming with larger manufacturing setups.
I think very, very important points that you have raised. One of the biggest challenges that startups, a lot of companies in the EV space are facing today. So that brings me to a connected question and also the last question for this particular round. And I think I'd like Vishak to give his views on that first. The push towards indigenization has resulted in the mushrooming of a lot of assembly units, especially in the e-two-wheeler or e-three-wheeler space, where they're basically getting, I think, CKD units and they're just building it up and selling it. And that brings in a lot of quality and reliability concerns. And in fact, I think recently in the news, we've seen a couple of vehicles catching fire. And that's also kind of raised a lot of concerns about owning EVs. So, how, in your opinion, can these concerns be tackled by OEMs and startups? What can we do to eliminate these concerns?
So initially, that's a mindset. So if you are thinking about indigenization as assembling, there itself, the entire purpose of indigenization is lost. Right? So we have seen the products that are that have taken 5 years, 6 years R&D and then come to the market. The R&D is not on building the frame. It is majorly R&D goes on to ensure that the safety of the product is ensured. So that is where EV has to be like the importance has to be given to the safety of the product because of batteries that are like it is exactly like carrying a bomb with you, right? So you need to be ensuring the safety part. So only way to tackle this is we need to first understand who is assembling, who is building their own product. There should be subsidies or whatever that we are targeting should be only given to those people who are building in their own vehicles. Right? So it's as open as that. If somebody is getting the vehicle from outside, just assembling it, the subsidy is already given in other countries. Why are we giving again subsidies? Right? So that should be the way to think about it. The second one is there should be a stringent policy of how each vehicle is certified. So now everyone can get the vehicle certified from our testing agencies. So at that stage also they can actually stop this. If they're not stopping it there and only when they're coming up and saying that, okay, it has caught fire, now you have to go back, that is not fair. Right? You have different checkpoints which is passing, everyone is passing and coming and putting it in the market. After putting it in the market, you are definitely allowing it to go for a damage and it is lost to people as well as the danger of life, right? So we have to ensure that these two checkpoints, the kind of certification process, there should be a column which says it is how much percentage is indigenous. It is there. We have gone through those. But at the same time, we need to ensure that people are not just changing us and putting it back, right? So it should be a strong certification process. And the second one is initially the assembly unit itself should be audited. So it cannot be like a shop. It should be like a factory. So audit report should be sent before the capacity of number of products getting produced in a factory should be audited. So right now, assembly, you can assemble 1,000 or assemble 10,000 from China. It doesn't make a difference. So these are two ways in which we can control it. After something has happened, no point in saying that, okay, it has caught fire.
Right. Thanks, Vishak. I think very, very well put. What about Mr. Narasimha? What is your take on this?
I mean, yeah, fine. I mean, see, of course, whether it is stringent certification norms or follow-up schemes in place, see, there is a human element involved. So you would always have things which will seep through, and more often than not, more will go through and less will be stopped. So frankly, I mean, if you ask me, I feel it is more from the fact of the price which the customer is willing to pay. I mean, I'm sure if Tesla comes to the market, whatever price it sells, it may have probably 1% or probably even lesser than that, the problems that probably a Nexon EV had. Because the point is, everybody is putting a product competing with a price point which the other is selling at. So obviously, the first casualty is quality. I mean, it doesn't require a Nobel physicist to find that out. So the biggest challenge in our country is the customer is wary of putting up a single penny more. I mean, if today X sells it for 99 rupees and Y comes at 100, rest assured, Y will go out of the market. I mean, he would not. So that is again something which some of us are accepting it, but I think that is at the key to make any change. Because why are people cutting corners? It's because they know they will not command a price. I mean, it is as simple as that. I mean, maybe Amazon or a Flipkart, when they buy their platforms, they would also, I mean, haggle you down. However, they know that, okay, beyond this point, if you tell them upfront that beyond this point, quality would be a casualty, they would understand. But a customer, especially a private individual, is not concerned. I mean, he would want the cheapest, price, and he would want the best quality, and they don't go hand in hand. So probably, I think that is where the biggest problem is. And another aspect that probably has skewed the EV is, I mean, how many of you ever bothered if 50 liters of fuel gave me 500 kilometers or not? I don't think any one of us bothered. I mean, it was accepted that they would tell 16, but you will get time. But in EV, unfortunately, because you're charging, you are keeping a track. That is also, again, which has been a defining factor. So that absolute range has also created a perception, and that again doesn't fit in the cost matrix. So probably, I mean, I would single it down to the cost, as simple as straight. I mean, when everybody understands that your running costs and everything comes down, your maintenance comes down. I mean, how many of you actually had a situation of a ceiling fan going bad or a mixer grinder popping up? I mean, a matched motor will never fail, period. But if you get a motor which is not matched, God save you. So, I mean, I personally feel that it is more about the cost matrix, and probably, as Vishak highlighted time and again, that you need to choose the right product. And the cost should not be the only defining factor. I think that is what I would like to add.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving a different perspective on this particular issue. And with that, we end the
You are frozen.
next round, which is the fire round. So I will just brief you on what it is going to be.
You went off air. You froze.
So,
For a few seconds.
am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to move to the next round with this, and that is the rapid fire round. It's going to be 2 to 3 questions per head and 1 minute for each question, and we'll keep it short and absolutely succinct. So, are you ready for it?
Yeah, it's the KBC moment. I hope I can do an audience poll.
All right. So I'll start with Vishak. What would be the 3 things that you would look out for in an EV policy?
What are they?
What would be the 3 things you would look out for in an EV policy?
So one is including more micro-mobility vehicles into the equation. So people are giving more importance to larger vehicles. We feel that the entire world is shrinking. So congestion is a problem that we are facing. So let's give some policy towards smaller vehicles as well.
Right.
The second one is, as said, the manufacturing of components. It should be supporting startups rather than large manufacturing entities at first, because new technologies has to be built. And the third point I would say is it should be from the standpoint of the final application of the vehicle. So it should not be focused more on B2C products alone. So B2B is something that is grossly missing in the current schemes. 3 points.
Thank you. Mr. Narasimham, the same question for you. What are the three things that you would look for?
I think that's being unfair now. Where do I fish out? 3 more, okay. From the policy initiative, probably I would want, see, any infrastructure development has to be driven by the government. I would probably stick my neck out and say, whilst they are saying we are consolidating demand and everything through ESL and others, I feel government should take the leap of faith and not only limit themselves to buses. I mean, probably I take a leaf out of what Vishak said, that in our cities where roads are already so jam-packed, it just doesn't make sense to run a 52-seater bus. So the cost matrix does not allow you to go smaller. So that is where probably the government needs to step in, have smaller vehicles. I mean, probably micro-mobility is one part, definitely, but as a community-driven and community-used solution, maybe go towards a smaller platform and drive it. So the government needs to step in and probably be the largest customer for the EV for it to get adopted. Probably that is one I would stick my neck out. And the second probably I would think is maybe more drive towards aligning CSR funds for R&D. While some of them are doing it, I would probably say that for certain define the sectors and maybe give them even more credit if they divert their CSR funds. So probably that is something that has to happen. And probably third is government has to look at as a policy measure setting up verticals, whether it is 3D printing, whether it is niche machining, whether it is every aspect of a hardware development process. A government has to probably invest and set it up, whether in a PPP model or as the case may be. But that has to happen because I may have the best of designs, but if I'm not able to proto, they will not head anywhere. And that is sorely missing. I mean, even if it is there and you know the people many a times, they just don't have the time or the bandwidth available to accommodate. So probably that is something as a policy initiative, if government can put in place, probably could give rich dividends down the road.
Okay, thank you. I'm moving on to the next question. Vishak, what is the most critical component in your value chain which is yet to be indigenized but has great potential for localization?
Motors.
I think probably I would step out that, yeah, that is something that we are trying to solve the puzzle. But yes, if I go into a subcomponent level, magnets, okay, magnets are probably yes. But yes, I mean, as business goes, magnets, if they are available and there is a requirement, it will find its path. But even electrical steel is something which government should look after. I mean, I was surprised when we were doing our groundwork. CRGO steel is luckily manufactured, and that is by Thyssenkrupp. All the CRNO steel is virtually imported. So there are a whole lot of indigenization that can happen, but probably one step at a time. For us as a motor manufacturer, maybe more than magnet, I would stick my neck out and say, start indigenizing the steel. Because whether it is induction motor, there is no magnet, but your steel is imported. So that is something the government should look at.
Right. Thank you. Next question for you, Mr. Narasimham. What is the key skill composition of your team?
Key?
Skill composition. Who would be...
Okay. Okay. As a design, I mean, I would break it down into two, design and manufacturing. Design essentially has to be somebody who's willing to keep the baggage of what he has learned aside and start from scratch. So that's about it. I mean, that's the only skill we look up to. And in fact, one of the main reasons we decided to come to IIT was that we could get some of the bright minds who otherwise gravitate abroad because they're not able to get an R&D avenue here. And unfortunately, COVID decided to knock at our doors. So we virtually had campuses which had no students. So we lost that opportunity. But yeah, we've been fortunate that we've been working with a lot of PhD candidates and MTech students who are, who have the drive to do something, and now they're interested. So that pool will get created. And insofar as manufacturing is concerned, we don't, it's a conventional manufacturing, it's just that we have to define the process. So there we are not looking at any specific skill set, but yes, for the design part of it, we would need people who are oriented towards looking things critically and with first principles. So that's something that we would probably look out for.
Thank you. Very, very objective. What about you, Vishak? What would your team look like?
So for us, the problem is like we start from product till the services. We have a core design. It starts from concept designers to mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. We have a core testing team. So that confines like around 13, 14 people working on these areas. So on the automotive side. On the other side, we have ops people who are basically MBAs doing operations of doing large fleets, managing large fleets. Then we have software people to build the platform. We have data scientists for creating data out of the vehicles that are running. We have business development people, which itself has two bifurcations. So one is people who are bringing in sales. The other people are bringing in, say, investors for this particular platform. So that is in itself is a business development job who convinces an investor to put money on EVs. But the other team actually goes to people like Udaan, Amazon, gets the demand and then brings to the platform. So the kind of people that we require is like from all walks of the life. Only thing we look at is it's more than skill, attitude matters for a startup. So we seniority doesn't matter. Number of ages that you have been in the market doesn't make a difference, right? So it's going to be like our team has just moved to Bangalore. We were in Chennai till last month. So within a month, we have taken a decision and we move the entire team to Bangalore. So that's the team that we have. If we are packing from Bangalore and going to Hyderabad, everyone will come. So nobody thinks about the other way around. So that energy we don't want to disturb.
That's great. That's great. In fact, my next question was actually going to be, why did you choose Chennai as the location for setting up your unit? But I guess I will have to ask, why did you choose Bangalore? So yeah, why Chennai or why Bangalore? What's your take on that?
So to start off, Chennai was the IIT ecosystem, and we grew from there. But when we changed our business model and when we start getting a lot of traction, most of the customers were in Bangalore, decision makers were in Bangalore. The second one was, so we have an outsourcing partner who is basically a contract manufacturer for us, who is also an investor in us. So he has a factory in Hosur. So the manufacturing has to go. And that made us, and when we are building a software team and when we are building this platform play, so then more people were in Bangalore. So people have started joining us from larger companies, larger startups, who are in EV as a service companies. So most of the people based out of Bangalore. So difficult for us to get people to Chennai and then work for it. So and Hosur, when the manufacturing unit is there, it is easy to move from Bangalore to Hosur. So it was overall a logical this thing, and on top of everything, COVID has brought the rent in Bangalore down. That made us easier to take a look at the rentals. We got it at a better price. So overall, looking at everything for a startup, it was no-brainer.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Narasimham, why Delhi?
Oh, for us, it was not much of a choice because both of us retired with our last posting in the Naval Headquarters. So obviously, since we are staying here, it was Delhi, and we knew that design part is not can happen anywhere, and traveling, of course, that was the time when COVID was not there, so traveling was never an issue. So in fact, we have done our initial set of prototyping virtually across the country. I mean, we did some work in Coimbatore, some in Hyderabad, some happened at Pune. So it could all happen. But yes, COVID upset certain things, and we knew that manufacturing, when it has to happen, it doesn't matter. There are a lot of other factors that would decide that. So that's how, for us, it was Delhi for nothing else but convenience by virtue of both of us being already living in Delhi. So that's how it happened. Now, where business takes, we will flow. There's not much to think on that.
That's great. That's great. I think I have personally learned a lot from both of your experiences, both yours and Vishak's experiences. And with that, I think we come to the end of today's podcast. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing such important and valuable insights with us. Thank you so much, Mr. Narasimhan. Thank you so much, Vishak.